Sexual assault allegations fly at Ravi Zacharias in the wake of his death. Welcome back to Bible Bears, everyone. I'm Ryder Cullison. Before we get started, go ahead and click that subscribe button so that you will be notified when I post new videos. Oh, and if there's a bell there, go ahead and click that too, I suppose. Thank you. Ravi Zacharias, one of my personal heroes, has been accused by 3 women of sexual harassment, sexual misconduct in the wake of his death. This allegedly occurred between 2005 and 2010 at a massage parlor that he partly owned. These women were workers at the massage parlor. Now, if you don't know who Ravi Zacharias is, he's a world famous evangelist, Christian apologist. He's the founder of RZIM Ministries. He has spoke to heads of state, universities. As a Christian, he was invited to the Mormon Tabernacle to speak. He's spoken at national prayer breakfasts. He was a wonderful evangelist in service to God for over 40 years. Now, he died in May at the age of 74 after complications with cancer. Now, if you've ever seen Ravi on stage, there's no clanging of cymbals. He's not hooping and hollering. There's no smoke billowing around him. He's soft-spoken, well-read, articulate, no arrogance, just comes off as a sweet, gentle man. He spent something like 250 days out of the year on the road, traveling the world, preaching the gospel. With that said, there are some accusations that these 3 women have made against him. These women suggest that they do not want money, they do not want apologies. They simply have come out to tell their story so that if there's any others who were alleged victims of Ravi Zacharias' sexual abuse, that they can come forward, or just to know that if those people are suffering with any guilt or any hardship, that they are not alone. I won't go into real specifics here, but as I mentioned, Ravi Zacharias owned a massage parlor. I believe he may have owned more, but there was one that he frequented when he was off the road that was 20 minutes by his offices. Now, he was part owner of this massage parlor. He has good reason to go there. Ravi Zacharias suffered a spinal injury in 1985. It caused him a great deal of pain. At the parlor, he sold his books. According to the workers there, he was very kind to everybody, got to know them, was comforting to them. However, unfortunately, during some of the massages, he behaved in an inappropriate manner, made inappropriate advances towards some of the women, and physically touched some of the women in an inappropriate way. These women chose not to come forward at the time because, according to them, this was a great man of faith, world-renowned. They didn't think anyone believed them, and they were terribly embarrassed about this. Now, these women have asked to remain anonymous because they understand what Ravi Zacharias stood for. They understand all the good that he did. 2 out of 3 of them said that they maintain he was a great man who served and sacrificed for the gospel. They knew that he spent a lot of time on the road. Now, for those of you who will accuse me of being a Ravi Zacharias apologist, as some of you did when I did a video about Jerry Falwell's fall from grace, yes, I am an apologist for what Ravi Zacharias did. He preached the good news of Jesus all around the world, 250, 260 days out of the year. Despite having a spinal injury, it was very painful for him. He preached the truth, and I cannot denounce that message. To attack him and suggest that everything that he stood for is wrong because of the sin in his life would be unjust. The good news of the gospel is that Jesus is here to save us. We know what Jesus is all about. I believe in the good news of Jesus. Christians believe in the good news of Jesus. Something like this shouldn't stop us from preaching the word. Now, in the wake of these allegations, Ravi Zacharias International Ministries has released a statement essentially saying the charges do not in any way comport with the man we knew for decades. And if you watch his videos, I've watched hours and hours. If anyone's seen him speak, yes, you would see this man speak and preach the gospel and not in any way believe that these allegations against him could be true. This is like finding out that Superman has for years been sexually assaulting Wonder Woman. It seems that absurd. Ravi Zacharias, as I mentioned at the top, is one of my personal heroes in the faith. I just loved his style and his sacrifice and the way that he could get across a point to somebody and that person would not want to attack him or argue with him. And yet, if any of these allegations are true, it shows how much Christians struggle with sin, even the ones that we feel are perhaps as white as snow. People that we feel there's no way there's any chinks in our armor. Now, Zacharias, if you know his personal story, at the age, I believe it was 17 or 18, he tried to commit suicide. He's from India. The pressures on people in India to achieve success, both academically and financially, are great. He felt like he was never going to amount to anything. And on the bed of suicide is when someone in the hospital brought him a Bible and he turned his life over to Christ. And from there, he hasn't looked back. He has brought the word to millions, literally millions. And yet, we see a man who potentially struggled with his own sin. Is he alone in this? I'm a Christian. I do these videos. I try to get the word out. But I struggle with sin. You struggle with sin. And if we read the Bible, the Apostle Paul, perhaps one of the greatest, if not the greatest apostle who was responsible for writing much of the New Testament, he was quite clear in Romans about his struggles with sin. He writes, "The trouble is not with the law, for it is spiritual and good. The trouble is with me, for I am all too human, a slave to sin. I don't understand myself, for I want to do what is right, but I don't do it. Instead, I do what I hate." He continues, "There is another power within me that is at war with my mind. This power makes me a slave to the sin that is still within me." And he continues by lamenting what a miserable person he is, because he realizes that for every good thing he does, he inevitably does something bad. He knows that there is a power within him, that power of sin, that is constantly warring with what his mind intends and wants to do. But this is the point of spreading the gospel, because we all have that sin warring within us. We all want to do good, but inevitably, so many of us end up doing bad. The good news is that Jesus is here to save us. He did not come to condemn the world. He came to save the world. Ravi Zacharias is an example, should be an example to all of us. This is a man who sacrificed most of his life to spread the gospel. Why? Because what did Paul say? The trouble is not with the law, for it is spiritual and good. The trouble is not with what Ravi Zacharias was preaching. The trouble is not with the gospel. The trouble is not with the truth of Jesus Christ. The trouble is with the sin that was in Ravi Zacharias that constantly warred with what he wanted to do. The trouble is not with the law or the gospel that I am trying to preach. The trouble is not with the law that I am trying to preach. The trouble is with the sin that is in me. Do not denounce the law. Do not denounce the gospel because I am flawed, or because Ravi Zacharias is flawed, or because some other Christian leader has fallen from grace. And we see these stories all the time at these megachurches. People get power, power corrupts. But the message of love, of forgiveness, of salvation, that is not false. Michael Ramsden, who does work for Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, gives us a good analogy here. He was in another country. He's in the back of a cab. He's speaking to the cab driver. I don't know how they got into the discussion, but the cab driver said he had left the faith of Christianity because he had been hurt in his life by some ministers. And Michael Ramsden asked him a question. He said, "Have you ever received counterfeit money while driving a cab?" And the man, without missing a beat, said, "Yes, it's happened to me several times." And Michael continued and said, "At the end of our journey, when I give you a 20-pound note, will you refuse to accept it because in the past you had received something counterfeit?" And the man paused, and the wheels were turning in his head. And Michael said, "You're smart enough to know where I'm going with this. Don't refuse something that is real because in the past you had accepted something that is counterfeit." The truth of the gospel is real. Ravi Zacharias, he may have stumbled in the past. That does not change all the good that he strived to do. Jerry Falwell, he stumbled. His wife stumbled. That does not change or make false the word of the gospel they were trying to preach. Maybe hypocritical at times, but the word is true. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to stumble. I'm going to stumble. I stumble all the time in my thoughts and my deeds. Am I an apologist for Ravi Zacharias? Yes. I am an apologist for his ministry. I am an apologist for the gospel he's trying to preach. But I am in no way suggesting what he may have done to these women is acceptable. I pray for these women that they find healing. I pray for Ravi Zacharias' international ministry. I pray for his family. I pray for all those who continue to spread the gospel but struggle with their own inner demons. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up, click share, and subscribe. And as always, I love you and have a blessed week.